I want to bring in Matthew Palazzola. He's the senior analyst at Bloomberg Intelligence for insurance. And Matt, this is one of the biggest disasters the U.S. has ever seen. In terms of total damages, we're looking at 250. Some people are saying $275 billion. But in the insured universe, which is what you focus on, it could be only, and I say that, in air quotes, $20 billion. Tell us the math behind that.
Yeah, so we try to do a ground-up analysis on this. We are looking at the structures impacted. We're looking at property values. We're looking at historical events. So that's where we're coming up with a scenario analysis. A minimum of 10 is probably closer to 20. Matt, those numbers you talked about, those very high numbers, those are economic. Those come out. The earlier it comes out, the less I have confidence in it, to be totally honest. You will generally see the insured losses as a percentage of the economic. I think those numbers coming out now, they include stuff like lost wages, health insurance costs, not stuff that would come into my world, and probably a little high if I'm being totally honest.
Okay, so we look at, though, the market declines for a lot of these big insurers are pretty significant. What does that tell you, just when you look at, what investors are saying about the outlook for insurers?
So generally, in a big cat event like this, you kind of see this reaction. I think we called it out in our note this morning, a bit of an overreaction in some of these names. We try to adjust for the market move, like the S&P was down over the past couple of days. Big insurance stocks were down more. We did the math on what it implies for the market cap. So a company like Chubb, it lost like $4 billion of market cap. They're not going to have $4 billion of losses in this event. So we think it's, a bit of an overreaction for a lot of the names.
In terms of the costs, are we just looking at, rebuilding structures that are lost, or are we looking at also lost revenue? Because we're not just talking about homes, right? We're talking about businesses as well.
So in the numbers, we don't have it explicitly in there, but insurance will definitely pay for a business interruption claim, or, if a business, if you can't physically get into the business, that is part of business interruption. We're not focusing too much on that, to be honest. We're kind of more just looking at a top down for the structures and, what we might see per structure. But you will see insurance companies pay that. The limits, these are fair plan limits, that's the insurer of last resort in the state, are about $3 million for a house and $20 million for a business. So it could be low for some homes, maybe sufficient for some businesses. But you're seeing those kind of rough limits in the state.
Wait, let's talk about that for a second. So the FAIR plan, I imagine that's an acronym, FAIR for something, is the insurer of last resort. So if I had purchased a house in the Palisades for $5 million, would I get FAIR plan insurance for the first 3 and then try and get Chubb to insure me for the additional 2? Or how does this work?
It wouldn't, not like that.
Okay.
So if you can't get Chubb to insure you for anything, then you'd go to the FAIR plan. So the FAIR plan, it's not an insurance company. It's kind of a pool, a residual pool. So meaning...
so this is when private insurers say, there's no way we're going to insure you there, you idiot. Your house is going to get flooded or it's going to burn down. The state says, wait, we want to insure that kind of risk. We want people to live in that area.
To some degree. So the FAIR plan was created by the state. It's technically not funded by the state. This has been a problem and, dare I say, a ticking time bomb for a while now. What happens is you're right, Matt, the state doesn't want people to not live in these areas, so they help create these mechanisms that can insure them too.
They want people to live in flood zones. They want people to live where wildfires.
I think they want to have, very nice, very expensive houses, and they don't want people to say, I can't live here because it's unaffordable.
Walk us through. I want to go back to an example of a person whose house burned down, or maybe your family member's house burned down, and you have all of your possessions in that home. You put basically your whole net worth into that home. Now it's gone. How much do you get back? How much do you expect to get back, and how much money do you lose?
Sure. So, The answer is I can tell you all the mechanisms, but it will vary greatly. If you are in the FAIR plan, the coverage is pretty narrow. So you're going to get less coverage. And to be honest, I don't know every detail about contents and things like that. If you had a traditional policy, you will insure it for your contents, you'll insure it for your rebuilding value. And that's kind of up to you and your agent. The insurance company will say there's a minimum that you need to insure this for. So if I have a $5 million house, they will assess, we think it's going to cost $4 million for you to rebuild this house, so you need $4 million of coverage. And at the end of the day, that will come back to if you have a mortgage, and then the bank is really pushing this because the bank has a big liability there. So you will have what you have, and that could be old. So it could be there's this thing called demand surge, meaning certainly in this event, there's going to be a surge on building products and demand for contractors. So that things could cost more. That doesn't mean you get that. You get what you are insured for. There is a product, Chubb actually sells a product where they guarantee it. So you'd actually pay more. So your premiums are whatever, $10,000 a year for a high-risk home, and you pay another $2,000 a year or whatever for the guaranteed replacement cost. So they'll say, okay, your home, whatever your home costs to rebuild, we'll pay. But that's the exception more than the rule. You had mentioned the contents of the home. You have contents. So you have your structure, and then you'll insure your contents. So if you've got, like Matt's got a bunch of Picassos in his house, right? Then you need to insure that for what you think it's worth, or you just don't get coverage for it.
So I wonder, when you're looking at these insurers, Allstate, Progressive, Chubb, have you seen, because of the back-to-back hurricanes that we had, or do you expect because of these wildfires that we're going to see some of them just go bust?
Go bust? No. The large national carriers, no. I mean, they're well capitalized. We may have said this in the note, but this will be an earnings event, not a capital. It will not need capital. Where you're on is smaller regional companies, and that's more so in Florida, that there's kind of specialists that stay in Florida, and those are these companies. They actually did okay during the hurricanes last year, but they're kind of this real bet on, is there going to be a big loss in the state or not? California has Mercury General, which is actually a sizable company, but is kind of California focused. They may have a big loss here, but even then they're not going to go bankrupt in that.
We don't have a ton of time left, but it looks like you're going to be watching the containment, right? And just the outcome.
Yeah, I mean, so there's a lot of uncertainty right now. Uncertainty in structures and what is a structure, how much each structure is worth. The containment is still low. The forecast, I didn't hear him, but I think the forecast is still pretty bad. So the winds are going to be pretty bad over the next 2 days.
Yeah.
What I've seen historically is, should you get good weather on your side, I feel like they can contain it rather quickly, but the longer it lingers on, the higher the losses are going to end up being.
All right, Matt, thanks so much for joining us. Matthew Palazzola there covers the insurers for Bloomberg Intelligence.